Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast, our CISO Saturday special, hashtag CISO Talk. So make sure you follow, subscribe, give us 5 stars. I've brought back one of my favorite all-time guests to the show because he just started an awesome new role, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. You've heard us talk about it before, but today we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty. Today's episode is all about the BISO role. I've got Patrick Benoit, the new BISO at CBRE. Hey Patrick, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always a good time.
It's awesome. Before we get started though, we're going to take a quick break for a message from our sponsors. We're going to be right back after this message. Hey everyone, I really want you to help me in supporting our early sponsor, Get Smart Eye. So Get Smart Eye is still in beta testing, but what Get Smart Eye is, it's an amazing app that lets you control your privacy, whether it be documents, pictures, anything that you want to share with your friends or not. Think of Snapchat, only no screenshots and no one else looking over it. So if you travel a lot, if you're in airports, coffee shops, shared workspaces, and you care about your privacy, Get Smart Eye is the right app for you to protect your privacy. And here's the deal. Get Smart Eye is still in beta testing. I use the app all the time. In fact, some of you know that I travel a lot, and when I do, I don't like people looking at my screen at airports. I do everything off my phone, and as such, I use Get Smart Eye for all my sensitive documents and all my planning. So here's what you need to do to be one of our early technology adapters, an exclusive offer for CyberHub Engage listeners. Text 41411, again, that's 41411, 41411, and type in the message of your text, Smart Eye. Then reply to the SMS that you're going to get with the letter Y, like Yankee, and download the Apple Test Flight app. Then go back to your SMS and you'll get a link to download the Smart Eye app. Download the Smart Eye app and use it. Again, this is an early offer for only CyberHub Engage users. Text 41411. Again, that's 41411 with Smart Eye in the message. Patrick, welcome back.
Hey.
How's Dallas, man?
You know, Dallas is Dallas. It depends on what time of day it is, and the weather changes semi-minutely. And so, we change 30 to 40 degrees a day. It was 80 a couple days ago and sunny, and this morning it was 46 and raining cats and dogs. So you figure it out.
That sounds like Atlanta. Only Delta's so much better than American when it comes to flight cancellations.
There you go. There you go.
Like Dallas Airport, like American Airlines, they're like, it's raining and there's thunderstorms. We're not going to fly any planes. And everyone else is like, huh?
Yeah, we shut down often for lightning, ground stops just because of lightning, but we get some decent lightning up here. It's not like in the Florida Panhandle, but it's close.
It's really nice. So congratulations on your new role.
Thank you. Thank you. Very excited.
It's kind of, this role's really, it's a new evolving role, business information security officer, a very kind of starting, I'll kind of do the preview of this, which is the silo of cyber, right? Initially, cyber was kind of under IT, information systems, and now we're starting to see cyber, instead of being siloed, kind of going lateral, and starting to address that. And it feels like the BISO role is that lateral role across the entire organization. Am I correct in my description, or am I missing something?
Well, you are in the way that I view it, and certainly we're kind of in sync with that. But traditionally, if you look at the BISO roles where you can find them out there, which I've mostly only seen them in some of the larger financial institutions and, some larger companies, but it's been traditionally what I've had described exactly like you had, a very linear role. It was the CISO representative to the business and turn around and be the business representative back to the CISO, but it was very narrowly defined to stay within security and internal. I've been kind of pounding the pulpit for a couple of years saying, security leaders have to be sales leaders. And so what I've done is taken that and actually, kind of sold this idea to the role. I think the role was intended to be somewhat linear to begin with, And I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to find a way to engage myself in the sales pursuit process through the entire sales and account life cycle, and engage myself in the product strategy process through the product life cycle, all with the purpose of driving or enhancing revenue and reducing risk. That's it. Now, all of that same linear client security focus has to be there still, but that's where it gets wide, like you're talking about.
I feel like for a lot of organizations today, we one of the big talks of this year, November, December, we're end of the year, so everyone's kind of doing that reflection for 2019. Supply chain, third parties, those were kind of the big, I don't want to say buzzwords, but the big kind of challenges that a lot of organizations experiences from a cybersecurity perspective. It feels like the BISO role is essentially designed to serve as that buffer in that challenge.
Yeah, to some degree, because the way I see the BISO role, it has to sit between, if you look at it from a customer vendor line, it sits between those two. And I say, okay, for my customers, I have to make sure that I'm providing them a view of our security posture, and that they're comfortable with that view. But then I have to also turn to the vendors and say, hey, you're providing services that may pass through to our customer. Therefore, I need to make sure that your posture meets our standards, but create kind of a wall between the two. Because one of the most difficult things to deal with in client security is if the client is running around and going to your vendors directly saying, hey, show us your pen test. Hey, show us your SOC 2. Hey, show us this and that and the other thing. And so the BISO becomes kind of that Chinese wall between the two. And I say, hey, client, we have a good vendor assurance program, third-party assurance program. Here it is. Here's evidence that we're enforcing it. So you don't need to talk to our vendors.
So that kind of takes me into that whole vendor client management and cybersecurity. A lot of times, this morning I was having coffee with a very good friend of mine who runs a penetration testing company. And I won't give him the cheap plug because I'm going to talk about stuff that we discussed, and I don't want to put him out there. I don't want his customers to know that we're talking about that. And so, we were talking about how everyone's always chasing the CISO in the vendor world. I got to get time with the CISO. And it feels like the BISO role is almost coming to also kind of alleviate that a little bit from a cybersecurity vendor place, or is that really not the case?
To some degree, if you look at the entire vendor universe at a company, the CISO and his executives that own engineering and ops and GRC will probably have more direct play with vendors that provide those kinds of services to the company. The BISO might come in more in terms of, I'll just, for lack of a better term, call them pass-through type services, or we have a product that is used specifically to support client services or client demand. In those cases, yeah, the BISO is going to be much more directly involved because the procurement is actually happening at the business level. It's not happening at the GCSO or the security officer level. So that's where the BISO gets involved with the vendor assurance, and it's a interesting role in that it's purely trying to encourage and help ensure that we have a super strong third-party assurance program. There is no, pure play decision making or approval or owning budget or anything like that. It's purely this encouragement kind of a role.
Do you feel like it's more of an auditing, almost internal, external auditing of different partners, but also kind of teaming up with sales, marketing, and business ops to really kind of build that security posture that everyone is so concerned about today?
Yeah, I think it has less to do with auditing. And I mean, that still remains with our compliance folks and with the internal audit folks and so forth, and with the third-party assurance team and procurement to, make sure that they're checking the boxes. But I'm looking more for, are there ways that we can strengthen that program, and have a better story to tell with respect to how strong our third-party assurance is, so that I can turn to the client with our customer reps and account reps and say, look, here's what we're doing to protect you, even from the vendor possibilities, which we all admittedly know that there's the worry, because so many of the recent issues have come through third parties.
Right, and that seems to be kind of where I see the BISO role kind of, you were right at the very beginning of the podcast. You talked about how the BISO role was predominantly in financial companies, and that simply they have so many vendors, so much supply chain, and they sell so much of their services that it made sense to have a BISO role. But now we're really seeing it spread across the rest of the enterprise, the rest of the verticals, or a lot of the other industries. It's the role's kind of inventing itself. Where is the role today based on what you're seeing in the market? That's the first part of the question. Then the follow-up to that would be, how's this role going to develop? And is it going to be a singular role, a team role? And are we going to end up seeing kind of the evolution of the end of sales engineers and the introduction of BISOs?
Yeah, so it is an evolving role. I'd say this kind of nuanced view of spreading out into sales and into product strategy is something that I don't think has been latched onto yet by more than maybe some of the forward-thinking companies. And that's not that anybody else hasn't thought of it or anything, but nobody else has been willing to invest to do it. So I frankly have not seen it in this kind of role where it's salesy, very salesy, and strategy wise. So whether it's true or not, I've been told that I was a unicorn because I'm a sales guy that knows security and knows tech. And everything that I do with the client and with the vendor and with the internal customers, there's a sales aspect to it. I don't have a widget that I can sell. So I have to sell our story. I have to sell, our posture and security. And I think that's a place that we're maturing to. But from a purely kind of industry selfish point of view, I don't think whether it be the CISO or security executives in general will have a strong play to have a big seat at the table, the adult table, really, until we start to show that we're highly supportive, not just supportive, but highly integrated into the business, and that we're helping to drive revenue. Now, you can call that a marketing play if you want, but the fact is, if I can somehow figure out someday how to get $1 to show up on that big circle of in the all hands that says quarterly revenue, and it says $1 security office, that changes the whole perception of the security office at that point. It makes the team be looked at differently, their approach differently, because now, wow, they generated some revenue. And it gives the leaders of security a better position to have discussions about taking that seat at the big table.
So in a traditional BISO role, do you see BISOs consistently reporting to the CISO, or do you see them kind of being
BISO role? Yeah.
Do you see that maybe changing in the future? Do you see it going to maybe the chief revenue officer or the COO or along some of the other business units?
I think it, for at least the conceivable future, the near term, it's going to remain under the CISO, because there's still a certain level of mystery surrounding security, and everybody looks at it like, and especially when we start using the term cyber in front of it, because everybody thinks that's mysterious and cool and everything else. So I think for the foreseeable future, it will remain under the CISO, but having a dotted line to the business executives is critical. Long term, could that change, flip over a little bit, and eventually become the business executives, the business CTO or the business COO, business line owns the BISO role and it's dotted line back to the CISO, yeah, it could flip. I don't know that it will in my career, but it could flip.
It's interesting. I mean, you're still young, Pat. You're nowhere near retirement, so your career is still years ahead of you, buddy. This could flip while you're still around.
It's possible. It's possible. But I mean, I'm older than I look, though. So
I won't ask
I'm
you your age,
James. I'm 104. I just look really good.
You're 104 and you look really good. You must be German. I'm joking.
Yeah, there is some of that in there, but yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting whenever I travel. It seems like there's specific countries where you can't tell how old people are.
Yeah.
They all just look pretty much, everyone looks like they're in their 30s. Even a 12-year-old looks like in his 30s. There's a good and a bad to that.
Well, I can't take credit for that. That's just, good genes, I guess. You know?
It's you know what I find very interesting about specifically the BISO role, which I've been, you and I spoke about this offline plenty of times before. The BISO role is to me the epitome of what you just spoke about, which is how can security start generating revenue and not become a drain on the business, but really become let's sell security. And we're starting to see that with a lot of the bigger companies, right? I mean, Microsoft pretty much came out and said 3-4 years ago, we're not a software company, we're a security company. Speaking to some of the partners I had on this morning at our daily cyber briefing, I had on Anton from Google Chronicle, and Google acquired Chronicle, and now they're essentially trying to kind of almost build a Google cyber vendor. AT&T acquired Alien Vault, created AT&T cybersecurity. Verizon is on that same path. NBC Comcast seems to be heading that route. Seems like everyone's starting to be like, how can we monetize and really pat what revenue we are losing in other parts simply because of the way the economy and user behavior is shifting? How can we do that with security? I feel like the BISO role is going to end up doing that for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I also think that we need to pay attention to the market focus when we start talking in that respect. So, like when you talk about Microsoft and selling as a security company, Microsoft is a tech company anyway. That's their core business, is to be a tech company. So selling security as a line item, okay, yeah, that's, they're going to sell to everybody that will buy that. I'm talking about something a little more narrowly focused. I'm talking about not diverting from your core competency at your company, but if the BISO sits in front of your clients and does audits and assessments with them to explain your security posture, and it is such an impressive story, and you're able to show such a mature posture, then it seems to me the next logical step is the client's going, wow, we like how you've done that. I wish we could figure out how to do that. Happy to help you. Security as a service, but only to our clients that are buying our core. So a little bit of nuance there.
So you're seeing that kind of develop with data centers. So Mark Hopt, a good friend of both of us, DataBank is kind of building that under his leadership, where they're starting to kind of look at cyber as a service for those really using DataBank. Your Amazon is AWS. Sorry, can't call them Amazon. AWS. Don't want to get a letter from those guys.
Nasty note, yeah.
Yeah, nasty note. We're AWS. So AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, you're starting to see those guys start to dabble a little bit with that. Why only for clients? Why not expand it? What's the reasoning behind it, in your opinion, really? Because I could argue that they should offer it to everyone.
Well, and they could, but it's the old story of do what you do well, and don't divert your focus too much. You get spread too thin, you start to make mistakes, and you start to dilute your core value. And so I think, and even in those cases, you're still talking about quote technology companies, and so for them that's not a reach and they are leading edge in that respect, offering those kind of services. But that's the tech innovators leading that charge right now. You know, being in a core business that is not, quote, a tech sell, not that we don't have lots of tech, but not a tech sell, that's where I think we start to get some interesting drive without diverting. And that's why we narrow it to clients, so that we don't divert our core expertise. Now, long term, could we do that? Sure. But in my mind, having, you know, done some entrepreneurial stuff, I would more than likely separate that out as a separate division or something. Once it gets to a point where it becomes a real separate cell, I'd kind of make it a different division and give it its own brand, its own sense, but make it, you know, driven by whatever your company is.
Well, we're kind of seeing that though with some of the, you know, kind of going a bit off the BISO role, but kind of staying within that line of BISOs essentially becoming the revenue drivers, similar to, I think Microsoft has this already, right? So they have Brett, who's the CISO for Microsoft. He's in charge of defending Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And then Anne, well, she's in charge of selling cyber to everyone in Microsoft, to all the Microsoft customers. She's in charge of defending those customers, selling them security services. And I almost feel like the CISO BISO role it might evolve to that. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying that's how it's going to be everywhere, but I feel like that's what it's going to end up happening is a CISO is going to be, because there's so much to deal with internally, nonetheless external, right? And today, a lot of the CISOs who don't have a BISO have teams that are overwhelmed, overworked. They don't have all the right resources. They're not funded correctly. How do you make the argument to fund the BISO role?
Well, think about it too. This is, you know, it's evolution. And if you go back many years, you had the evolution of the CIO role and then the CTO roles early on. And then eventually you had the CISO role develop, you know, in the early 2000s, after 98, I guess, or whenever it was, to start to develop. So this, you know, but now those roles of putting somebody on the information officer or the technology officer side down into the business has been around for a while, and it's matured to the point where they don't call them a BIO or a BTO. They call them the CTO for that business line or the CIO for that business line. So to me, it's conceivable that someday, you know, you could say it's a CISO for that business line, which is what Microsoft has done. They have dual CISOs. It's one has the internal, one has the external, and they're not parent-child or subordinate to each other. So yeah, long term, it could end up being like that. The BISO could report to the business and be the CISO for that business, conceivably, you know.
Conceivably, as you kind of build that out, you know, we constantly look at Microsoft, and you're right, they're a tech company. When we take away let's say the BISO role from tech and from finance, and we take it to the more, I guess, traditional business, manufacturing, retail, and others, where it's brick and mortar, it's more of a physical security also plays a role in that. I feel like with tech companies, your only physical worrisome is, someone breaking into your office building. And for that, you've got so many different layers. Defense in depth is all over the place, right? You get a Class A building, you've got a security officer in the lobby. To go up the elevator, you need someone to, badge you up. So there's all these different obstacles, defense in depth, and kind of that aspect of it. But in the brick and mortar side of it, the BISO role carries a whole different weight as well, doesn't it? I mean, wouldn't it be different for retail than it would be for tech?
Yes. When you talk, I'm thinking more now, more a B2B kind of scenario. But when you start talking B2C, you have a whole different, you got to figure out a different model, because you're not dealing with the end consumer directly. Right. Now, in theory, could you develop a consumer model for a quote BISO that goes out and provides awareness to consumers and helps helps consumers ensure that their IoT devices are configured properly for security. And could you sell that? At the very least, could you use it to drive value that you might not otherwise have? Sure, that's not this specific role, but it's the same kind of role.
Right. I mean, because I feel like when the BISO role is very much a B2B kind of role, but then, we say our weakest link in cyber is always humans. I'm not going to beat around the bush and talk about all the reasons. You and I have discussed it enough to where if they haven't listened, go back, listen to our previous episodes. We talk about the human element more than enough times. There's the aspect of consumer behavior in cyber that really needs to be addressed. I feel like it's almost like Verizon's "Can you hear me now?" Right now, the guys with Sprint, really funny, but it's the same thing. We're driving it into consumers of you're going to get coverage everywhere you go. And in security, the awareness is done at a business level in a lot of organizations. It's not really attributed to personal lives. And so we end up losing the battle because you can have the best hygiene in the office, but if you go home and you don't have any of that, eventually whatever you're going to catch at home is going to follow you to work, right? It's like the flu.
Yeah, and that's exactly why in previous roles, when I had to build out security awareness, I was always really reticent to build kind of the checkbox security awareness where, we're going to have an hour presentation every month, and we're going to have, you have to do the 1 hour class every year and stuff like that. And it's all focused on at work, the business. And so I opened up the discussions to, how do you protect yourself at home? Let's have discussions, ask me questions about, what do I need to do with IoT? How do I use a password manager? Why shouldn't I leave stickies at my house either? Why, all those questions about security around your house and around your family are all pertinent questions. So even as a security awareness program in a business that's pure B2B, we should be offering those kinds of things for our employees because that's our consumers of our technology, the employees and then the clients. So by dealing only with clients, we're dealing with only half the population of our prospective attackers or vectors.
So do you find in the BISO role, because you're dealing predominantly with non-cyber people with other parts of the business, that one, it's raising awareness, and number two, that it's actually increasing the company's posture because they're having to work with someone like you?
Well, I think where you get the biggest bang for increasing posture, yes, it is awareness, but I think the biggest bang to increase that posture is the fact that I feel it makes security a more accessible thing. It makes it, it puts a face on it. It makes it approachable. Now, assuming you have a BISO that is a salesperson, that is a marketing person. But if you don't have, in my opinion, a true BISO. So, but, you put the face on it, and then all of a sudden, people start coming to you. One of the things I try and drive into a BISO kind of role also is that whenever anybody has a question from the client point of view, and they're coming to you, they're coming to somebody in the technology area and asking the question, rather than them having to think about, well, who do I go ask this question for? I want them to immediately go, oh, well, the BISO knows what that is, or he can find out. So let me go ask him. And the flip side is, if anybody inside the realm of security or technology is saying, we need some information about security at the client or the vendor or whatever, who do we go to? Again, they should go, the BISO can get that for us. Now, not as a gateway. That's the caveat. We're not trying to stop any other communications. But we are, as a primary goal, one of the secondary goals is trying to reduce the external touch points so that the other people can all focus on their real job. And if we already have the answer, why let them go chase around looking for a different person to find it if we can just give them the answer? And that's part of the BISO role too.
So that brings up a really interesting point, because one of the things with a lot of corporations is the global nature of business and rules, obviously regulation, compliance, technology, and cyber challenges vary from nation to nation. Do you see the BISO role being regional, or can it be one global role?
You know, I think, I don't think, well, it can be global to a degree, depending on the person you have in the role. If you have a person in the role that has all the great qualities of being a BISO and also happens to be very culturally aware and you know is very can get along, maybe you know speak bits and pieces of the language to drive relationships and things like that, yeah, you could probably get away with global. But realistically, in the end, you're going to have to put a face on that person. And flying a person from the US to Singapore or to Tokyo or to London every week because you want to put a face in front of a customer probably doesn't make good logistics sense. So yeah, I see this as eventually it's a BISO team, not a single BISO. It's a BISO team where certain BISOs have focus at the service line level, at the business level, and certain BISOs have focus at a regional business line level, and some combination of that. Depending on size of the company, you could have a BISO that handles multiple business lines in one country or one region, and then you would have replicative BISOs for the other regions. You could flip that on its head, and you could have a BISO that covers, you know, one business line for multiple regions. So you could go either way with that. It's going to depend on the people. Just like with sales, if you get the right salesperson in there, you can do a lot of stuff. You get the wrong salesperson in there, doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to work.
So when you paint the BISO role, and you've been kind of preaching this, like you said, for the last few years, and saying this is a really important part of advancing cybersecurity and its awareness, but also kind of getting the business to not look at cybersecurity as a drain on their resources, but rather contributing to the posture, winning more business. What would be the right KPIs around measuring the success of a BISO?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had some KPI discussions over the years, and you know, when we talk KPIs, people tend to focus on the obvious stuff. You know, how many client security questionnaires did you do, and how many questions were on them, and you know, what was your turnaround time? And those are valid measures, but you know, you need to get to a point where you can look at you know, trends of relationships with clients that may have been impacted by the BISO. I can remember at previous roles, companies doing similar roles where we actually would track the team, the BISO team, for lack of a better term, that team's impact on either driving revenue or reducing cost. So we actually had all of the people on the team maintain records that showed, hey, because they sat in a meeting and because they suggested a different course for a solution, we saved the company $1 million. Or we helped drive an additional part of revenue because of the solution that we helped adjust. And at the end of the year, we would work every year to show the company that you would have lost more money than you spent paying for our team. So that's the kind of thought process you have to go through when you think of KPIs, is how do you show business value, not just transactional work.
So when we think of business value, obviously different businesses look at value a little differently. You know, in one of a very good CISO friend of ours of the show here, you know, works for a company that really competes at with some of the largest corporations, very startup company that's really blowing up, and you know, he's constantly on the road. I mean, trying to get him into studio has always been a challenge because I'm like, hey, we want to get you in, we want to get you in, we want to get you in. And he's like, well, I'm in London. And like you said, and he's wearing the CISO, BISO role. And it feels like as companies grow, what's the right stage to bring in a BISO? And what companies do you think the BISO role really fits?
So the BISO role can come to fruition for kind of two general reasons in my mind. One is that there's so much client-facing work that's going on that the CISO can't effectively run the entire organization and face the client all the time. So in that case, you kind of take a step back, you bring a BISO in who faces the client most of the time, and you bring the CISO out for the really big strategic accounts. You know, so that's one driver. The other would, and it's workload driven. The other would be, frankly, if the CISO just doesn't like being a sales guy. You know, he's personable or she is good in front of the customer and stuff, and that's not the question, but it's just not the talent that they like to focus on. So you find a BISO that is talented in that area, and you put them in front of the customer. And again, you only walk out the CISO when you really want to bring out the big guns. And it also gives you an opportunity to bring the level of escalation down a little bit too. So if somebody is having difficulty and the CISO is already in the mix, the only place to escalate is above him. If there's difficulty and the BISO's in the mix, you can escalate to the CISO and you can still contain it within security.
So you see this as kind of being a very good kind of driver of not only business, but also kind of lowering the security noise that security creates in an enterprise.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, there could be other reasons. What if you have a CISO that is just at a point in their career where he's the best CISO or she's the best CISO that you've ever seen in keeping the organization secure, but they just don't want to travel all over the world, or you know, they don't want to play that sales role and be on the road, be the road warrior. You know, maybe that's the right time to bring in a BISO to take on that, kind of represent the company as a whole and represent the CISO to clients and to internal face company on the road. And again, you only bring the CISO out for the big events, and it becomes much more impactful then when the CISO steps in.
So when you think of what level of experience would be ideal for a BISO to be successful in his role, is there kind of that perfect job description outside of being an outgoing, well-spoken, intelligent guy like you are? What else does it take to be a BISO?
I'll get your check in the mail. You know, it's interesting because people have said that combining those skills is kind of a unicorn ask. Maybe it is. What I have found is a lot of times when you say, here's a BISO role, who would be interested? Who are you going to get that are going to submit applications? A big chunk of those people are going to be GRC people that have just, you know, they've done the client security stuff forever and ever and ever, and they understand the client security stuff. That's a pure play traditional BISO. So now
is that the right role? Because I'm going to stop you there for a second, because I think GRC, I think compliance is the complete opposite of security.
Exactly. And so that's not the right role, and that's the point. You need somebody that has balance and has breadth, because if you want to reduce the noise to the rest of the company, you have to be able to speak, intelligibly on a number of topics. You have to be able to answer questions that would normally be sent off to the infrastructure team at a high level without getting into the weeds. You need to be able to answer those questions yourself without having to turn to them. So it's that combination of deep technical background across, infrastructure and security and application development and project management and all that kind of stuff. but then it's also that you have customer facing experience where you have had to sit in front of a customer possibly to make a living, you know, that you're selling your service. Selling is different than widget selling, as we know. So if you don't have service or consultative selling background, it's going to be difficult for you. Not impossible, but it'll be difficult.
Is there the right mix? So let me rephrase the question, because I want to go in a bit of a different direction though. Is, you know, when you talk, do you look at this role from within? Do you want to bring the outside voice that's kind of going to bring a fresh outlook into this role? Do you see this as becoming something that we're going to, you know, in 2020 we'll see this kind of be a trend, and then by 2021 it's a standard expectation role somewhere?
I think like all roles, it may evolve that way. You know, that's a maturity evolution kind of thing. I would never, ever, ever discount looking at people inside the company. I said this many, many, many years ago, and I won't say how many because that'll give away my age other than 104. Years ago that I had a discussion with a leader of mine, and I said, look, you know, you're going outside looking for candidates who can put anything they want on that resume. And other than them not being able to answer the questions, you can't validate that. But you've got somebody in-house that you already know what they're capable of. Why would you ever, you know, bring in an outside person if there's an inside person that can do it, other than the pure choice of, I need new ideas, I need a different way of thinking?
Which kind of takes this whole BISO role, because the BISO role is really a whole new way of thinking about security, right? It's taking the package that the CISO, compliance, legal, IT, and everyone else builds, and you're really packaging it up so that when you're talking to internal, external clients, partners, and others, that you're really giving them a very good feeling about security and about doing business with the company and so forth. Is it really going to be that outlook, like that outside of the box kind of feel to it?
Well, I mean, it should, but you know, I'll temper the answer by saying that, again, most companies still view BISO as that very traditional linear role. So, you know, what we're doing and what I've been proposing is still a little bit outside the box, just on the surface. But you kind of gave a great analogy there. What if the person, instead of saying we're trying to sell this feeling, instead we're saying, look, we're taking this package of our security for our company, for the data, for, you know, privacy, for, you know, how we deal with legal and you know, all these kinds of things. How do we deal with insider threat? Everything you can think of with respect to security. And that in one big bundle is a product. So now, or a service, however you want to look at it. But now we have to take that and we have to develop marketing materials sufficient to explain that to customers. And we have to then go out and sell that to customers. Now, the end result is not a direct, you know, purchase order that says we're going to buy that from you. But, you know, in a sense it is, because if I sell that product as the add-on to what the core product is they're selling, and they buy that, then haven't we just done the same thing as any salesperson does?
And that's a really, really good point, which is, do you really compensate and measure your CISOs? We spoke about part of the KPIs being, you know, measuring not only their value, but how much money they save the company. Do you really start kind of compensating them based on the amount of business they win? And is there a real way to measure that? Because we all know sales guys, they say, he helped, but listen, it was all me.
Right, right. And so I think that's where there's an opportunity for the BISO role to kind of evolve early, is the CISO, if the BISO remains under the CISO, now the CISO can turn and say, internally, here's our security posture, and we have all the kind of traditional metrics that we use to look at how we're securing and protecting the environment, which has always been very hard for boards to understand. But if he can then also say, through the BISO, we were involved in the closing of X number of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deal because we have this product called our security posture that the customers are buying, that they're scrambling to buy. So now can you measure that by saying, what deals did you contribute to? It's a soft contribution, but it's still a contribution. And then can you take that and use that as a later, could you use it as a quota? Could you turn to the BISO and say, you have an obligation to be involved in X number of dollars worth of deals? And obviously you have to define what involved means, but can that become a quota? Could you pay the BISO some bonus or commission based on that? Those are all things that I think are possible and certainly worth thinking about.
As you kind of develop your role and you're in this new place and you don't really have a lot of places to draw from, what are some of the ways you're really kind of evolving the BISO role, and what are some of the lessons you're learning along the way for it?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest lessons, other than so the first thing is that part of the role of the BISO is that traditional role, which is to apply some sort of process rigor around the logistical aspect of dealing with the client. Here comes a questionnaire. We got to answer the answers, get the question back out. Here comes an agreement. Read the agreement, make sure it's okay, help with MSAs, SOW, all that stuff. That's very logistical, and I think there's a support function within the BISO team that helps fulfill some of that administrative stuff, just like you have sales support. I think the other lesson, though, is we have to stop thinking in terms of pure play technology and pure play security roles and how we just make those better, and start taking lessons from more mature roles like the sales organization. And that's why when I start talking about a BISO being over in the sales side, I'm looking for ways to emulate the best part of the sales organization and become a member of their team and sit on their team when they go out to a client, a customer. And you have that flip side on the product side. I'm looking for the best ways to emulate product owners and product development managers that are, driving roadmap strategy for products. And how do I bring any of those kinds of thoughts and ideas into the BISO role and apply it to security?
So I know you're an aviation fanatic like I am. You're a pilot. Before we went live, you and I were talking about, airplanes crashing and burning.
Lighthearted stuff, yeah.
Yeah, really lighthearted stuff. I mean, nothing to worry about for those flying today, tomorrow, Monday, wherever they go. But would you say the BISO role is kind of like the cabin manager of an aircraft? How would you compare the BISO role in aviation? Because that's what I've been running through my head for the last 51 minutes.
Just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm like, what would compare to a BISO in aviation?
Is it in some ways, because the client side of delivery of security is such a large aspect of every company's security process. I guess I could make an argument that it's it's kind of a navigator, but for the client side. Or a first officer, but for the client side, for that particular piece of it. Is it the concierge for the aircraft? Yeah, maybe. Since they're the customers, yeah, could be. I'm not sure that's a great analogy, but I'll take it.
Well, I mean, and it's not taken away from being a CISO as a pilot. I mean, you could also put a BISO, in my opinion, as the co-pilot. Because you really are kind of that angel that's, depending on your relationship with the CISO, you could be that guy whispering about different things that you're seeing, that you're getting feedback on, that the CISO is doing, that really help him or her build and expand and really spend correctly as they continue to bolster and improve the security program.
Well, and that's true. And I mean, let's think about in terms of like career progression too. You know, there's two ways to progress as a CISO, in my viewpoint. So you get your first CISO role, and it's a $100 million company, and you're the CISO, and you got 3 people or 4 people working for you. You're still the CISO, so you're learning the aspects of what's going on there. So where do you go from there? You generally have to go to a bigger company, and the likelihood of you stepping from that right into a really big company is pretty slim. You know, you'd have to be lucky, really good or really lucky, one or the other. So what may happen in a lot of cases is a CISO is going to jump from, under $1 billion, maybe $1 billion or a couple $1 billion CISO role. Eventually they get to a $4 or $5 billion CISO role, but you go through 3 or 4 roles before you get to a big company. What if after you've been a CISO for a $1 billion company, you looked to a, tens of $1 billion company and became a BISO the way I'm viewing a BISO, not the traditional, but with the sales aspect and everything else involved there. And now all of a sudden you're a BISO in a, 10, 15, 20, $30 billion company. You've been a CISO, now you're a BISO. What avenues does that open up for you in your career as a CISO when that gig is over? I think it opens up huge avenues. So I think it's another path.
You bring up such an awesome point. I mean, that is so true. Today, as a CISO, your best chance of advancement is maybe becoming a CIO at one point. I mean, or Michael Johnson's case at Capital One, cybersecurity advisor. I mean, I'm not going to get into that today. I promised myself I wasn't going to do it to myself today. I wasn't going to, but it feels like, there's downsides to being a CISO, and like the BISO may not have a lot of downside. I mean, we may end up seeing kind of the BISO being the cockroach of the cyber world that survives all the nuclear options and just always ends up coming back and just multiplying and kind of helping recover the ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, think about this. I mean, this is the way I think about it. So there's nothing magic here, but I'm fortunate. I've had a software development and an infrastructure background. So I've been on the technology side a lot of years. So, and now I'm in security. I love security. So what if though, for whatever reason, I decided I want to go back to technology? I won't say most, that's probably a bad thing. There are a lot of CISOs out there that have been in security their entire life. And so if they went to go apply for a CIO role, it might be hard for them to get there. But let's look at a BISO. If you take the model I'm proposed here, that I've proposed, and the BISO now has been in the business, they've been on the sales side, they've been in the product strategy side, they have to be able to talk infrastructure, they have to be able to talk applications, they're aware of everything innovative that the company's been doing over the tenure as a BISO, and they know security. Now they want to turn around and go be a CIO someplace. I think it's much better groundwork laid than I've been in security my entire life, and now I want to try and switch over. Just my opinion.
I like your opinion. I don't always like agreeing with people I have on the show. I think it makes for a boring show. But I feel like this was a really...
$6 to get you a coffee at Starbucks, right?
Well,
for you.
When so to kind of wrap up, because we're almost out of time, and I want to respect your time because I know you're very, very, very busy as a BISO. And you've got a ton on your plate, so I appreciate you, for taking the time. But I also want to mention on February 5th, we'll be in Dallas for a CISO BISO roundtable with DataBank. Mark Hopt and I are going to take what we've done in Atlanta a few times, bring it out to your neck of the woods. We'd love for you to be part of our event, Patrick. So be there.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah. Love to do that.
We're very excited about it. Our last group in Atlanta had we had about 20 CISOs in the room, and we just were all over budgeting and kind of building our security program and some of our challenges with the board. And Mark brought up a great kind of topic, which I think will lead off with in Dallas, which is everyone has an incident response plan for their organization, but do you have one for your career? What happens when you wake up in the morning and you get the phone call in the middle of the night? You know, I don't want to do the dreaded 3 a.m. cliche phone call that says we have a situation. Obviously, you've got a plan for your business unit and responding to that incident. But what about you for yourself? And I felt like a lot of people who are in security haven't really thought that through. We live on the edge of kind of, you know, that skyscraper. You know, you see those people walking those high beams, and we feel like we're solid, but man, one slip up, your fault or not, right? And you could be gone. And do you have a plan when that happens?
Yeah, and that's a great topic. And I mean, I'm a big believer in always keeping your network active, and always, you know, knowing, looking ahead to where you're responsible for your own career. I tell everybody that everything is about marketing. You know, it's got to have some aspect of marketing in it. So I have marketing objectives for a BISO program. You know, how do I socialize and market the program? And you need to do that with yourself too. I forget who wasn't I listening to a podcast? I think you know Jordan Harbinger, and he said on his podcast, which I think is just a wonderful thing to think about: make sure you dig the well before you need to drink the water.
Yep.
So getting thirsty and then trying to dig the well is a little too late. So,
Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I really appreciate your time. For everyone listening, Patrick Benoit, BISO at CBRE, kind of defining the role. When we'll be in Dallas in February, I'll have him back on. We'll do a 3-month update if you'll come back on the show, Pat.
Absolutely, love to.
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars, comment, and make sure you submit question. Go to our website, cyberhubengage.com, where you can see the list of our guests and submit questions to those guests that we will ask on the show. So thank you so much for tuning in, Pat. Thanks again. Everyone have a great rest of your Saturday. Shabbat Shalom. We'll be back with more next week.